Now, the much anticipated U.S. presidential election has been concluded with former president and Republican candidate Donald Trump making a historic return to power in what is perhaps one of the most fiercely contested elections in over 200 years of the country's democracy. Vice President and Democrat candidate Kamala Harris had the chance of also making history as the first female president of the United States, but the voters decided otherwise, accepting the outcome of the election that saw his party losing both. President Joe Biden and Harris have addressed the U.S. And then, of course, after the election, Biden says he respects the choice of the American people. He also promised to ensure support for the peaceful transition of power to his arch-rival Trump, even as he called on the people to have confidence in the integrity of the election. Perhaps more instructive in Biden's Rose Garden address is when he told the people in an apparent jibe at Trump that, quote, "You can't love your country only when you win." Very strong words there. Well, back home in Nigeria, what lessons are there to draw from the conduct and eventual outcome of the U.S. presidential election, and what can Africa also learn from it? Well, to help us do justice to the U.S. presidential election, especially the takeaways for Nigeria and Africa, we have joining us in the studio former presidential aspirant Adamu Garba, who is also a foreign affairs analyst, and also joining us is our rights analyst, Frank Tietie. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us. Let's start with you, Adamu. Well, it's a very hard one for the Democrats, and Nancy Pelosi is already putting the blame on the doorsteps of President Biden, because, according to her, he could have taken a decision much more earlier than he did. And it looks like, despite the shortness of the time, in her own thinking, Kamala Harris actually did quite well. What's your view?
Yes, my view is that I think if Kamala Harris will have win this election, it will have been that even Nigerian democracy is far better than United States democracy.
Oh, interesting.
Because it's a stolen primary election. Biden actually conducted the primary election and won. Then the same Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama staged a palace coup and picked her, Kamala Harris, and put on top of the people without any primary election, allegedly maybe virtual primary election. And suddenly she was running for the presidency. So if that could happen in the US, then maybe Nigerian democracy is better, because at least our candidates emerge through democratic process within the internal party structure. So I believe Nancy Pelosi should have everything to blame their own approach to twist and tweak and confuse the American democracy. I think what Donald Trump did was to re-engineer and reset America and regain the hope of the world about the American democracy.
Now, without interrupting, there was a formal Democratic National Convention where Kamala Harris was actually affirmed.
No, that was just a virtual democracy.
Well,
but
there was a
primary
DNC
election.
convention, actually.
The convention was virtual. There was no delegates. There was no voting. She just came about and took over from Biden and then began to run. And this, to me, is like a palace coup, staged by the same Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama. So Biden, to the best of my knowledge, I think with the issue of he should run, he should have decided earlier. Doesn't mean, why don't they, from that beginning, why don't they convince him to allow Kamala Harris to pass through the normal process of primary election? Why did she just decided to allow him until the last election? Then she's trying to carry blame game upon Biden. I think Biden has done best. The institution of United States democracy has proven to be much more effective. And I think it's a very good thing that President Trump won the election. All right,
let's talk about Biden actually saying that, look, it's not only when you win elections that you think about the country. I mean, what are the takeaways from what Biden said? And then even Kamala Harris, too, I mean, during her speech, very, very strong speech, I mean, that she offered after, it was confirmed that she had lost.
Well, the elections have shown that the American democracy is not actually perfect. And we in Nigeria will now have to learn that there will be times for us to make emergency changes where necessary. And in Nigeria, we've done that with the idea of doctrine of necessity when it became necessary, I would say. So where there are unforeseen circumstances in the political process, you now learn to be inventive. And I think we should continue to adopt that and not continually refer to the United States as the bastion of democracy as if it is perfect. What these elections have shown that the U.S. Democracy is not really perfect. A good example is what Mr. Garba has referred to. It was a disservice to the Democratic Party and to the American people that Kamala Harris was not subjected to that, thorough screening process that, that goes on before and after.
Well, they had an emergency.
Now, no, there was no emergency. To be honest, I think that it was unfair to Joe Biden, If Joe Biden had contested that election, and perhaps there would have been more certainty. But to think that the whole issues changed to diversity, equality, and inclusivity higher that Kamala Harris represented, and then the sexist and racist issues now became undertones in defining the election becomes a problem. But to your question, whether there's no option as to, because the Americans have really built a strong institution that even when Trump, was convinced beyond doubt that his election was stolen, and as sitting president, he couldn't stop the transition. Even when his vice president, Mike Pence, was to see to the certification process. So it is something that's inevitable. So it's only a form of political convention and camaraderie that such statements are made. Donald Trump has won in such a surprising manner. To think that he won in all the swing states is just an indication of what's going on across the world as we speak. There is a high rise of nationalism, which we thought was restricted to Europe. But as it is now, it's now moving on to the US. So can't Africa also develop its own nationalism? You are a political scientist and you are well versed with the history of nationalism across Africa, from the days of Nkrumah, even starting from Haile Selassie Nkrumah through Gaddafi, and then our own Dr. Azikiwe. There was the pride of Africa. So there was this Africanness to the extent.
A period of renaissance.
To the extent that if you were in Jamaica, if you were in Guyana, anywhere outside the African continent, but you had a black skin, you were wishing and wanting to do everything possible to come to the to the continent. Stevie Wonder, if that will interest you, Stevie Wonder of all persons made every effort to dump the his American citizenship and identify with Africa, and then trace his route to Ghana. So we should also try to build this nationalism so that it also becomes very difficult for any other person who wants to come to Africa, particularly this great country that we are messing up called Nigeria.
Okay, so Adam Garba, what's in Africa? What's Africa's preparation ahead of Trump's presidency? Because we've seen lots of things happening, and people are asking that what's Africa's place in Trump's potential presidency, right from the constitution of his cabinet to the resolution of key issues, and then taking crucial decisions. Could we see a dynamic policy change of the Trump presidency in his second term towards Africa, or we should just take care of ourselves and not think so much of a Trump presidency? To
be very candid with you, I would want to agree with my brother here, Mr. Frank. He mentioned clearly that it's time for us to come back to nationalism. Like when you look at Trump's policy, it's mostly nationalist, socialist, capitalist mix, kind of. So, but generally, it's about nationalism. He talked about to hell with globalism. He was saying that he's going to withdraw completely from World Health Organization. So it means that the Reagan-Thatcher system that all of us keep implementing from 1986 up till today, we will have to recalibrate and throw it away. Most of the African countries, the issue of where you have to depend on some economic virtual realities because you have some foreign reserve and then you are painting it out and you are waiting for Fitch rating or Moody's or S&P 500 to tell you that you are good. All those ones doesn't work no more. Economy have to come back to reality. Trump campaigned on the basis that he will want to reindustrialize America. They will stop offshoring their jobs to China. He is going to even engage in trade war with China. He is going to only relate with countries on one-on-one basis based on corresponding mutual obligation and reciprocal commitments. So when you look at this kind of arrangement, you see a nationalist leader who cares for his people, who cares about the development of the people. So we too, as Africa, particularly our country, Nigeria, we will have to re-engineer our system to be more nationalist, to buy Nigeria, to eat Nigeria, to make Nigeria, to grow Nigeria, to support Nigeria, to be Nigeria in every other way. A situation whereby we have to go to IMF or World Bank with our balls, you know, looking for some loans to be able to, all those things should go away.
Well, some analysts say that's where the problem lies, because America has always been seen as the bastion of democracy, the one who protects all, and the one who should be, you know, the finest example of how to have a world that works for everyone without allowing dictators to take over the world and all of that.
Yes, yes.
Now, and having a Trump thinking inwards more than outwards, some have said that this is the beginning of the decline of the American system, actually, the American civilization.
To be very candid with you, when you look at the direction of the neocons generally, as predicted by the American century by Zbinski, you know, the main strategies, the grand strategies behind the new American century. Immediately after the fall of the Berlin Wall and the dissolution of the USSR, America don't even know what to do next. Their policy has been one somersault or another. Look at what happened in Somalia then. Look at what happened in Serbia and Herzegovina. There were a lot of crises. We have genocide in Rwanda. And we have series of crises between Zaire, Congo, all those up to this moment. Anywhere America stepped their foot from invasion of Afghanistan, there were destructions. Iraq, there were destructions. They went to Syria, they went to Libya, in many, many places. Then it shows clearly that their working principle that they have adopted post-Soviet era is a failure. So the best solution is to come home and reorganize themselves, because they keep losing. Look at the debt profile that they are piling. 35 trillion US dollars now in debt, a huge bubble. So they are struggling to maintain their own economy while trying to say that they want to control the world. So the global policeman role can still be able to function in economic terms, not in military terms. And that is why I love Trump. Why? Because his own African policy during his last presidency, 2016-2021, he has no even African policy. In fact, he appointed John Peter Pham towards the last part of his administration in March 2020. That's when he appointed Undersecretary for Africa. And immediately that guy came, the first thing he did was to withdraw American troops in Somalia. So you need to the
target was the Prosper Africa policy and all of that.
Exactly. So I think people like Trump are the people that will not interfere in your local political activity, so allowing you to develop on your pace. So it depends on the kind of leaders we have, whether they can think properly for their countries, or they will still be thinking that somebody outside is going to help them to develop their economies.
All right, Tietie, I want to have your pick on that too. Is it the decline of the American civilization? I mean, because people are saying that, look, with the way Trump is going in the next 4 years, America may be trailing behind China, Russia, and some other and even the EU right now are beginning to take a critical look within and saying that, look, let's think for ourselves, because it looks like the Americans are no longer a stronger ally to support us.
The sum of about $850 billion in defense as defense spending. It's not an ordinary country. The next country that follows is just about $80 billion. I'm talking about China. So it still remains a global power house with regards to international relations.
In terms of military?
Military strength. And the truth about it is that, you know, in international relations, it's military strength that counts. However, when you look at a president who is accusing a certain military industrial complex and is associating with the Democrats Party war machine, that is meaning that you go across the globe, you know, to cause wars so that munition makers can continue to make bullets and build tanks so that they become richer. And I mean, so there's a whole lot of, it used to be conspiracy theory when you think that, there is really a globalist movement, there's a deep state that controls the United States, and then Trump is coming to say he's breaking down, simplifying governance. So it's not really about the American decline. When it comes to American influence, yes, it's waning because of the rise of China. And J.D. Vance, the vice presidential candidate, now vice president-elect of the Republican candidate in the U.S. Last election, said, look, America has to, and I like the fact that Mr. Garba is speaking to it eloquently, that America has to redefine its foreign policy. So when it comes to, global influence, it's about a different kind of foreign policy. It's not just going to start wars, multiple wars as they've had, but if the wars must start, it must be in the interest of the United States. But here's Trump saying that, look, I will build global peace through strength. So he's saying he's going to even put more money into the military, not necessarily because he's going to fund NATO, because he's actually reconsidering, the idea of the way the Americans fund NATO. But you can continue to see a whole lot of poverty, homeless people in the United States, and then you see it spending all that kind of money in all those across the world, and then to even think about the immigration crisis that has added to it, where America, is trying, which many Americans believe that it's targeted to changing the American cultural landscape as it has happened in the United Kingdom. Then America, the US may not be as assimilistic, I would say, like the United Kingdom. However, these are the issues. Not necessarily that it's declining, but it does need to redefine the way it's going about it. Interestingly and painfully, we haven't seen a lot of American investment in this country, even in terms of sustaining democracy. We've seen a lot more for the foreign policy impact of China in terms of, giving loans that are so favorable that African governments are becoming very lazy, wishing to take loans from China, which we believe is a debt slavery. But on the other hand, I think Americans should, continue to invest more in the idea of building, sustaining democratic processes. Look at our National Assembly. Look at the way we practice policy here. And I must close in 10 seconds on this matter. That our late sage, Fela Nicola Kuti, got it all right. That, look, if you give us democracy, it's not our own system of government, but if you give us democracy and we are not doing it right, you should be at every point in time telling us that you should do it this way, do it this way. If the Americans can't do it that way, they should mind their business.
Well, the big elephant in the room here now is Ukraine and then the war in Gaza. Adamu Garba, talk to us, can Trump really stop this Ukraine war? Or was it just a campaign rhetoric to actually win votes? Does he have the capacity to actually stop this war? Because the war will be watching out for his policies in the next 1 year when he gets into office from January 20th, what he's going to do, and of course the steps. Because if you read what John Bolton had said sometime last year, when Trump actually got the ticket, he was like, Trump doesn't have long-term policies. That's the major problem that he has. He thinks on the go. Do you foresee any strong policy towards Ukraine that we can see some achievable measurements in 1 year?
One thing I like about Trump is that he always tries as much as possible to do what he says. Right, and he's a realist. He works with the moment, and that's what is expected of a leader. And in fact, by just this victory that he had, on the 5th of November, Trump has made a call on Ukraine twice. First call together with Elon Musk and Ukrainian president, asking him to start making arrangement for a proper ceasefire. The second call was with Vladimir Putin to discuss the possibility of this ceasefire. As I'm talking to you, you will see a lot of slow activities that is ongoing now within the Russian-Ukrainian war. In fact, they even mentioned to him, that Vladimir Zelensky, that he should not expect a ceasefire where Ukraine will reclaim its own entire land. 25% is already lost, to Russia, and he has to accept this fact. So when he is making this kind of statement, and you see Zelensky is also predisposed towards peace, he issued 2 press statements. But
there's already a war fatigue between both parties.
Exactly. Actually. So he wants peace. And again, when you look at Vladimir Putin's speeches too, he mentioned that he wants peace. In fact, he was talking about ditching the US dollar, but he came back because of the rapprochement of Trump. He was saying that he did not reject the dollar. It was the dollar people that sanctioned him. Now that there is a good friend that is on board, it's likely that he will still continue to use the dollar, not neglecting their own kind of internal policies towards BRICS and other things. So when you look at all those arrangements, I believe Trump has the best capacity to stop the crisis that we are seeing, in fact, if not even stopped completely in Russian-Ukrainian war, and also even in Gaza.
Yeah, and I want to have your view on that, actually.
One of my finest memories in my international law class with Professor Sage at University of Benin was when he was describing what happened with regards to the Iranian hostage crisis, when Jimmy Carter was president, but he was seen to be soft-pedaled and also, not so well respected as an American president. Meanwhile, there was a Ronald Reagan who was saying the very moment if he won, he would bomb or level Iran and he would do whatever it takes to get those hostages released. Now, he didn't have to even get inaugurated. The moment he won, the hostages were released. And I think it was a humiliating moment for the United States. For months, American hostages were held in Iran, and the US couldn't do anything. It couldn't send fighter jets. It couldn't send special forces. And then America was on its knees. And then it was during the campaign, and there was a Ronald Reagan and a Republican too. So the idea that the Republicans govern with this new mantra of Trump, that promises made, promises kept, is that he's seen as someone, look, he will use, statements like, I'll bomb this out of all of them, whatever it is. So the idea is this. He has approached it by saying the wars wouldn't have even started if he was president. And I think the world believed him. Because who could have actually believed that Trump could reach out to Kim Jong-un of all persons? And then
of course.
So and
that's where the fear actually lies. Most Americans are also being, the American bureaucracy, the oligarchy there, most of them are very cautious. And Trump has 4 years only to spend. So if he's also taking steps that may be deemed to be short-term, that are not going to be long-term American policies, don't you foresee another government coming to actually dismantle some of the things that he's going to put in place?
I think Trump is in the right direction when he's now teaching Americans to mind their business and to allow people to be, and to allow us, especially in Africa, to be.
But Israel will never, for example, allow America to mind its business, because Israel continues to bomb Gaza because it links its powers to the American people.
The conundrum defies a lot of explanation at the moment, given its entrenched interest in the American establishment, whether it's a Republican government or a Democratic government. That's a different matter entirely. So, but when it comes to, ensuring world peace, global peace, which we need greatly, because even we here in Africa were grossly affected by the war in Ukraine. So we are happy that there's an American president who doesn't really care about what happens to us, but allows us to have our own kind of government, even though it's a very bad thing.
And that's what some people are afraid of, Tietie, because some dictators that were always being watchful about their steps, because the US is watching, will go ahead and do whatever they want to do, rig elections, because no one is watching.
We had a Bill Clinton in power when the crisis in Rwanda, when the genocide in Rwanda was ongoing, and he didn't do anything. At all. You see, so it's not necessarily about, we are supposed to have a United Nations, right? That should deal with issues of global peace and to eliminate issues that have to do with development issues like hunger and all forms of crisis. But it's not supposed to be the US. So if the US is strong, that can contain countries like China, then we should be able to have another line of balance of power. Not necessarily return to the days of the bipolar, global status, where you had the Soviet Union on one side and then the Americans, and then you constantly had phony wars, all sort of wars in Africa. And for a look at what happened to Angola for all those years. Who would have ever thought that Angola would, be this prosperous? But many of those years were spent between, imagine what MPLA and the General Savimbi's crisis. So we don't want all those things happening anymore. So, but however, when we have a strong United States that can constantly represent and speak to its values, and then that's sufficient, but not coming and carrying out one sort of imperialist influence across Africa. And I think Trump should be commended for minding America's business.
Yes. Okay, well, very quickly, as we try to round off this conversation, Garba, let's talk about the Joe Biden's policy of having Africa have 2 seats at the UN Security Council. Do you think that a Trump administration will continue with this? And that if indeed he continues, do you think that he would want to actually give us 2 very strong powers that have veto, rather than what Joe Biden is actually proposing? Just, having these 2 seats, but not having veto power.
I don't think Trump will even trust the United Nations this much, because his entire campaign was anti-institution. Yeah. During his last time, he withdrew from United Nations Human Rights Council, and now he's talking about withdrawing from World Health Organization. So any person that is thinking of getting one big power in the United Nations Security Council is just going to be. In fact, he mentioned even on his speech just before the victory, some of the last speeches he made, that UN is owned by China, so there is no need for him to invest deeply in US. So I think if we can get the seat without veto power, it's like a toothless bulldog, but at least you are there, it's okay. But I don't believe that investment in thinking that Trump is going to commit, like Biden did, to the globalist institutions, because he's an anti-globalist person, to the globalist institutions like United Nations. I don't think Trump is going to carry this thing up.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, also, I want you to talk about what the concession speech that Kamala Harris actually mentioned, where she said that, and I want to quote her now. She said that while I concede this election, I do not concede the fight that failed this campaign. Going on, what sort of opposition do we expect to see to Trump's policies by the Democrats?
Yes, I see Democrats, all of them running blame, from Pelosi to Biden, you know, from Hillary Clinton to Obama, from Kamala Harris to her own campaign team, the debt that they have now, $20 million, you know, all those confusion. They will have to go home and review themselves. In fact, some of them were even reigniting what Bernie Sanders used to tell them, that you have neglected the middle class. You are only talking to the upper class and the lower class. And that is going to spell doom for you. And the same middle class and the lower class that combined to make Trump presidency. So they saw that they have a strategic mistakes and they have to reorganize themselves, because Trump presidency is like a coalition presidency. Somebody like Robert F. Kennedy actually is an independent candidate. He was even on the ballot.
We also hear he's going to be given...
So it means that there is this perfect consensus behind Trump. So they will have to go in and review themselves. But as it stands now, Trump has unprecedented mandate to do all the policies he claims he wants to do for the American people, and the American people are okay with that. So it means the Democratic Party need to have a soul-searching moment for them to rediscover themselves, and possibly if they can be able to challenge Trump in the future, or the MAGA movement in the future.
Yeah, and Tietie, I want to have your view on that. Kamala Harris.
The shift of the Democrat Party from being the party for the working class to now be a party for the liberals, which is now in some terms described as the wokeist movement. It has now been shown to be something that cannot stand the test of time. And that's so the Democrat Party has to now retrace its step to be the party of the working person. President Obama ran, we're using Bon Jovi's song, who's going to walk for the working man. Now, the Democrat Party has not been reflective of that party that works for the working man anymore. So you can now see from the level of endorsement, those that endorse Donald Trump. So the point is that the Democrat Party must stop this liberalist, gospel that is spreading across the world, as a party that endorses abortion, in an unrestrained fashion, transgender and all sort of, liberal, agenda across the world must now.
Well, they put that all under, they couch it under human rights.
No.
Rights
no. Let's not. Of course, of course, I have a degree in human rights law, and I tell you the truth. That can't not necessarily. Yes, there can be freedoms, right?
Rights of the minorities.
No, there must be freedoms, right? I agree, there must be freedom, but you cannot impose such freedoms in a society in such a way that traditional values are lost. So you can't talk. I mean, why? How? It will be difficult. It's inconceivable that Americans can no longer, define issues of who is male or female, or as men are playing in women's sports. These are very sentimental issues which Donald Trump used to campaign. And it turned out that, look, the Democrat Party was on the losing side. It has been seen as, something that it's a bit, not so anti-human, quite alien to the American culture. And, those are the things that actually, helped the Republican Party. And you must consider that we in Africa here are very skeptical of such liberalist tendencies.
Yeah,
because
but very quickly, Trump,
African
I'm already
countries.
calling you Trump. Very quickly, Tietie, I won't allow you to go without analyzing this issue. Biden says you can't love your country only when you win. So Trump is an anti-institution. I mean, he also, when he lost his election, he brought out these mobs and all of that. How profound is that statement?
Very profound, very profound. But Trump was, just before the elections, Trump was forced to make a commitment that he would accept the outcome of the election. But he also added a caveat, only if it is fair. The truth about it is that, Trump must, he has a psychology of being used to winning. And that even if he lost, he considers that he has won. In the build-up to look at the campaign. He was asked, give us one one moment of weakness. He refused to acknowledge.
All right.
So he has this Superman mentality, and that's why he's always sponsoring. He's always with them at WWF and you know, with the other guys.
All right, Adamu Garba, let's have your view on that. You can't love your country only when you win. That was a jibe, an apparent jibe at
Actually, very, very solid statement. And it's not just to Biden, it's also to the Democrats themselves, because they have lost, and some of them are angry, not only to Trump, including even Kamala Harris. I don't even know where she is now, because she's mourning, right?
When you lose
she's still vice president. There must be commendation for Kamala Harris.
Yes.
One thought, because the vitriol was actually too high, you mean seen in the debates, and he kept on, you know, in a crescendo of attack against the person of Donald Trump. We didn't expect that. In Nigeria, you wouldn't have that kind of politics. In Nigeria, I think to a large extent, the kind of politics we're not so acidic in our language. You won't find Atiku Abubakar attacking, Bola Ahmed Tinubu in such personal terms. You won't see that. But you know, the way it descended in the American style politics was a bit a low for me. I think that we here in Nigeria should be given applause. So we joined forces with Maurice Uwu, who believes that the Americans still have a lot to learn from us in terms of
okay, gentlemen, in just 60 seconds each, what should the AU be preparing ahead of time, ahead of January 20, when the Trump presidency will be coming up?
Thank God Trump said he's going to remove restrictions on these environmental programs, because that is what is killing us. That's what is deindustrializing us. I saw you are chairman of Arise TV, Ogbabena. He's talking about the need for NNPC to develop their refineries to work. You know, these ESGs and these Samoa agreements that came are those things that are restricting our opportunity to develop our energy potential. And without energy, you cannot industrialize. Yeah. So the EU are now free, not restricted by these neoliberalist policies that force them to deindustrialize. We have to come home. We have to review ourselves. Even Europe, that since Marshall Plan of 1945, they have been depending on the US NATO protection all their lives. Now they are saying they are going to review their own internal strategy. So because of that, we have to come back to and see that we develop our internal capacities. We shouldn't be putting people that are not serious in seat. We should make sure that we put people that will bring forth some progress and development for our continent.
All right, very quickly.
Left to Donald Trump, people like Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala won't be Director General of the WTO today. So Donald Trump is a bit, does not have much respect for Africans. However, he's someone who has, who negotiates a lot. So if you ask me, I think that the African Union should begin to engage from that point of negotiation. Let us negotiate. Let's have something like the African Growth and Opportunity Act, especially for us again.
Well, we must thank you so much, Frank Tietie is a Rise News analyst, and is also Executive Director of KESA. We must thank you so much for joining us. And of course, Adamu Garba here is a former presidential aspirant and of course an international affairs analyst. Thank you so much for a wealth of wisdom, gentlemen. That's the much we can take on this edition of This Week. Thanks to our production team here in Abuja, Lagos, and London. Do join us same time next week for another exciting edition. I'm Somna Sambo.